Greetings, gardeners. Well, going back about 5 years ago, I did a video on summer pruning raspberries. It was one of my earlier videos. Well, it turned out to be a really popular one. Apparently, it's a good video on how you do a raspberry patch. You know, I mean, to me, raspberry's pretty simple, but apparently it's a complicated issue to understand, and I must have explained it well, because I got a lot of hits on that thing. I don't know, maybe 200,000 or 300,000 views on that single video. But over the years, I have thought about the fact that it could probably use some restructuring since it's so popular, and I wasn't quite as good at doing videos back when I did it 5 years ago. I've been thinking, well, you know, maybe I'll go back and kind of revamp that video. I've also had I've been a couple of grumpy people over the years for some reason that they just can't abide by the fact that I stuck a guitar music intro on that video. I have had several complaints. It was a free video. It was a darn good video as far as most people are concerned. But anyway, so I thought I'd redo the video, clean it up a little bit. I'm going to toss the guitar music off just for the grumpy people, and as far as music, there are other videos on my website if anybody wants to go listen to, you know, me play guitar. You won't have to listen to it on the Raspberry video anymore. So here we go. Enjoy. We're having one of those wonderfully cool July 1st mornings here in coastal California. It's time that we revisit the raspberry patch. That's something that has to be done every year. Right here in front of me, I have the ever-bearing raspberry. The ever-bearing raspberry is one of the most popular types. Raspberries really fall into two general categories. The ones that will make 2 crops a year, that's what we call an ever-bearer, and the one that makes 1 crop a year. That's ordinarily called a summer, or sometimes called the fall-bearing raspberry. Okay, now I'm going to discuss both this time. Pruning raspberries really isn't hard. If you look here at the patch, what you'll see is that we have some really nice green, beautiful, succulent-looking canes coming up. We also have some nasty brown-looking canes over here. The green, succulent-looking canes are this year's new shoots that have not fruited yet. They will fruit later this summer, in the fall. Then we have the shoots that fruited last year, fruited again this spring. That's what makes them ever-bearing. And now they're passing away, and so they have to be removed from the patch. So here on the 1st of July, I am out removing last year's canes that have now fruited twice. So close up on the subject matter. Right here, you'll see the little stubs, the stems left from the fruit that was picked off these canes. Oh, about a month back maybe, during May and June was when most of it came. Right next to it here, you see nice, tall, vigorous, green, good-looking canes. Those canes are the ones that will bear the next crop. Right here is a stem that already has some green berries forming on it. This cane, and its buddies right next to it, these canes have not yet fruited. They're virgin canes, okay? And so these are the canes that we have to leave in the patch when we're pruning. The canes that have fruited and are now exhausted and going to die have fruited twice. They fruited last year, late in the season. They fruited again this year, early in the season. A cane will never fruit more than twice before it's removed. So any cane that's fruited 2 times leaves the patch. Any cane that either hasn't fruited or has only fruited 1 time stays in the patch. It's pretty easy to tell when it's time to take them out, because if you look here, you see it's brown, nasty, ugly. Looks like my raspberry patch is sick. So it's fairly easy to see from above, by the condition of the leaves, which canes stay and which canes go. But you can't prune a raspberry patch from the top. You really need to prune it from the bottom up, because we have to take the canes off just an inch or so, a couple of inches above ground level. Leave a very small stub above the ground, as little as possible, without damaging the root system. And so we're going to have to go downstairs to take a look and see what the job looks like from the understory. So before we get down there, we got to make sure that we have the appropriate tools for the job. With raspberries, since they have prickles on them, prickly little guys, we need a pair of gloves. Helps. Those of you with very sensitive skin, unlike my tortoise hide, will probably need a long sleeve shirt or a pair of gloves that have a gauntlet, so some kind of protection for the arms. Otherwise, we're going to need to have a pair of pruning shears and perhaps maybe even a lopper. Generally, I don't find that I need one in raspberries, so I've just brought my shears along here with me. Make sure your shears are nice and sharp and well oiled, ready for the job, so the work is easy. Well, here we are down at ground level where we're going to do the dirty work on these raspberries. I have laid down a little sheet of cardboard over here on the ground. I got a couple of planks to keep myself from rolling in the dirt. Otherwise, I'll have to change my clothes when I'm done with this job. So the first thing we need to do is to look underneath the raspberries and to identify the difference between the new canes and the old canes. Now this is really simple because when we look down here, the brand new canes are bright green, okay? The old canes are dark brown, and so that is actually quite easy to identify. Okay, so right here, this is a new cane. That's a cane that will be kept. Right back here, brown cane. This is one that's going to leave. So we remove 100% of all the brown canes in the patch in July on an ever-bearing raspberry. Everything that's green might be kept, but we're also going to look at proximity. They may need some thinning. We will also look at weak canes. Not all these canes are the same diameter. Some of them are thinner than others. And so thin canes, weak looking canes, for instance right here, I have a cane that's only half the diameter of the one right here next to it. Larger cane here, weaker cane here. Both of them right in the same spot. The weak one's going to go. I'm going to thin them out a bit. So now let's get onto the shears and start cutting. First off, take off the weak cane right out the front over here. Toss that out of the way. Here's a brown cane right there. That one's coming out of there. There we go. I was tied up on top, so it gave me a little bit of trouble. Here's a stub from an old one's too long. That's a weak cane right there. You can see this is not looking too good, so that one's coming out. All right, another brown cane here, another brown cane there. Alrighty, tossing them over to one side here. Okay, well, here's one here. This is in my face. That one's gonna go, and so on. So basically, I just work my way across the patch here, cutting off all the brown canes, yanking them out, then thinning out the weak green ones. And then we're going to take all the good green ones that we've kept and we're going to push them inside the wires on top there. Now the raspberry plants where we started on the other end of the patch were golden raspberries. The berries over here on this end of the patch are red raspberries. Now I'm into Indian Summer, which is a red everbearing. Indian Summer looks just a little bit different. I've got a whole pile of the canes out here windrowed on the walk row. They're going to get dragged out underneath my persimmon tree. We'll let the leaves fall off for compost back there because the raspberry leaf has an extremely high nitrogen content, and so it makes a good fertilizer. As far as the canes are concerned, I ordinarily let them dry out back there under my trees. And then the following summer, I'll pick them up and use them as starter for my barbecues. Raspberry wood will impart a wonderful flavor into your barbecue, and once they've dried for a year, they light up real easy as kindling. Don't go throwing that stuff out just because it's thorny. The thorns burn up in the barbecue. So we've pretty much finished the patch of ever-bearing raspberries over here. Look down and underneath the plants. You'll see there are no more old dark brown canes. Everything down here at ground level is nice, fresh, and green. In general, the rule I use for what canes to choose and what canes to remove as far as the new growth is this wire right here. I have a wire right about belly button or belt level. That's the first course I use to hold up my berries as the canes are growing. I usually will figure that if they've made it to that wire so they can stay inside the bed, by the time I get around to pruning, then they're okay. I also tend to remove anything that walks out the outsides of the bed over here. I don't want them heading into the apple orchard. So all that's pruned off. If it gets into the walk row, I dig it out. That's a good place to get new plants from as they're beginning to escape if you need to expand things. You really want to get this work done right in between cropping the berries and then before the new canes begin to seriously flower up, because it's a little vigorous. You have to yank the old canes out of the patch, and if you wait too long, they're going to tear up all your berries and make a big mess. Okay, so at this point now we've finished pruning out this ever-bearing raspberry bed. You can rewind real quick back to the beginning and take a look at what it was like before I got going, and then fast forward back to the current image. As you can see over here, now we have a nice thin looking bed. It's all nice clean green looking canes that have some flower buds on the top of them. There's no old crunchy looking wood, no brown stems, no dying leaves or anything like that in here. And so I'm going to repeat again about ever-bearing raspberries. This group of canes that's standing here now after the July pruning, this group of canes wasn't here in spring. It grew during the course of this spring and summer. The group of canes that were here over last winter fruited back in May and a little bit into June, and then they began to die away. Those were the canes that we just got done removing. Okay, they fruited last year too, at the end of summer, the beginning of fall. So ever-bearing raspberries, the canes fruit twice. Once in the year they grow, and once at the beginning of the following year. So it's real simple. It actually is quite simple. It's always the fresh canes that are left in the patch when we prune, and most of your pruning with these is done during the summer months while the canes are growing. In the winter time, after these berries are done with their first flush of fruit and the leaves begin to drop off, I am going to go into the patch and I'm going to head these canes back and make sure that they don't get too tall, otherwise they'll kind of get floppy. I usually take them back to somewhere right around 4.5 feet. Now I want to move on to pruning some fall-bearing raspberries, and I would like to talk about pruning some black raspberries. Okay, so right here in front of me at my feet I have the Purple Royalty fall-bearing raspberry. The difference between fall-bearing raspberries and the ever-bearing raspberry is that on a fall-bearing raspberry, each cane only fruits one time. On an ever-bearing raspberry, like the ones we just pruned, the canes fruit twice. Once one year, once the next. So this is a fairly new raspberry in my garden. The Purple Royalty raspberry, I believe, is a hybrid between black raspberries and red raspberries. It has that habit of not being ever-bearing, which is, well, in my book, for our climate, not that desirable. I do prefer the ever-bearing types. But hey, if you want a purple raspberry, there's only one way you're going to get it, and it's in the classic old-time fall-bearing raspberry. And so these were put in 2 years ago. Right here in front of me, I have a cane that, like the ones in the other patch, is starting to turn yellow. It's getting brown leaves on it. There's no fruit left, just the little stems from the fruit that have been picked off. They were pretty good, too. It was not a bad raspberry. I recommend it for flavor. And then around it, we have nice new green canes. And so with these, the process is really simpler. When this thing gets done fruiting, you cut the cane off. Case closed. You're finished. So what we have here is the original plant, and the first year it was put in, it grew a pair of canes. There's 1, 2 right here. This one and that one.
they're identifiable by the dark colored woody stem, the brown dead leaves on them, and the little bits of berries left. And so the way we treat these is after fruiting, just take it, cut it like that. Alrighty, so right here is the other one. Both of these canes were part of the original plant. After it was planted, new canes grew. So this one here grew, this one here, that's a pretty good sized cane. It walks just like the everbearing raspberry does. So this plant, just like the other raspberries we pruned, the everbearers, does move outward from the original. It was placed right here on that stake, and now it's over here, it's over here. We got it over here growing with the alfalfa. Put the alfalfa down, there we go. So you can see. And so some of these canes are a little small. I'm not going to worry about the little ones at the moment. We'll leave them there so it can establish a root system. This one's twerpy. That's going to come out. So I'm going to take away really weak and inferior canes. Otherwise, I'm going to leave the rest of this alone at this point. If this was a well-developed stand that had been in a couple of years, I'd probably be more aggressive at thinning the little canes out. Otherwise, it's treated exactly the same as the everbearing raspberry, but it has just the one fruiting off of each cane before the cane is spent and you remove it. Okay. Next, I want to talk about blackcap raspberries. The classic black raspberry that I grew up back with in the Midwest. This is a new one here for me. It's an old berry in my life, but it's a new berry in California for me. This one almost has a habit more like the blackberry, that it has big, long, trailing stems. On the blackberries and on the blackcap raspberries, the rule is never let the tip of the stem touch the ground. If it touches the ground, it sends down roots and makes a new plant. Then you get a big mess. So, over here is my new blackcap raspberry, and as you can see, the stems on this puppy, they're really, really long and willowy, almost like blackberry stems. Right at the base, you see a nice, beautiful green frosty stem there, another beautiful frosty green stem here. This is the new growth. The plant has doubled itself since it was planted. The original stem is right here that it was purchased with. This old stem is the one that we're going to remove at this point. If you look up higher on the plant, you'll see that it's almost done fruiting. There's a little bit of black raspberry left down there, but not very much. And again, here you can see that long, arching, trailing growth. Oh, it dangles all over the place, almost like a blackberry does. Oh boy, look at all those. Whew, how did I miss that? Just like the birds. Oh man. Oh, that is so good. The flavor of these is somewhere halfway in between a blackberry and a raspberry. That's really the only way I can describe it. It's mysterious and it's wonderful. Definitely every berry patch really ought to have one. I'm definitely going to get every last one of these off. Now, if this really gets going, I do believe what I'm going to be using is a stake. We'll drive a big redwood stake or some such thing in here and tie them up to it just like we would with a grape. Okay, there. Now, we got the tomato cage over the top. So, next thing I'm going to do is come all the way down here, about 2 inches above the ground, and I'm going to cut off the rest of the plant. And that's really all there is to it, all right? With the black cap raspberry, the black cap doesn't sucker. It's not going to run like a red or a gold or a purple raspberry will. The way it will propagate is if we let the tips touch the ground like the blackberry, it's going to peg itself, and then it'll start putting roots down and make this big patch that just pops up everywhere. So to keep them tame, so we have a tame berry patch here, we're going to keep them supported so that the stems never touch the ground. I've got, like I said, this tomato cage here. I'm going to use a wood stake to help me, and then I've got it planted right at the edge of the persimmon tree here, and I'm actually going to utilize some of the branches in the persimmon to help support some of the stems in time. As this plant gets bigger, we'll kind of tie it up to the edge of it over there to keep them off the ground. So again, with this plant, just like the purple raspberry or like the fall-bearing red raspberries, they only fruit once on the stem. So once the stem is finished, it's removed. New stems are allowed to fill for the next year. And again, it will only make one crop every year.
So it's not an everbearer, neither is the purple raspberry. It only makes that one single crop, which comes actually a little bit after the first crop of the everbearers, but before the last crop on everbearers. So if you actually have like the purple raspberries and the black cap raspberries in your patch, along with everbearing red or gold raspberries, you'll find that you're going to get a spring crop from the everbearers, you're going to get a midsummer crop from the what we call fall-bearing raspberry here, and then you'll end up again with another crop later in the year from the everberries. So you will have berries constantly. There we are. That's the latest on the revised berry situation. Raspberries Revisited here in Fremont, California.